If I were 20 years younger, I would marry you, the farmer said to the 27-year-old heiress, but he was not prepared for her response. Before we begin this story, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe there is a right age to find a new love and start life over? Tell me in the comments. Now, let's get to the story. If I were 20 years younger, I'd marry you. Walter Brooks said that without looking at Melanie. The words escaped as he fitted the last board of the old oak gate that divided their two properties. The moment he realized what he had just said, his hands trembled and his heart raced. Melanie stood frozen too, looking at him. Walter was 57 years old. He was a man known in Willow Creek for his discretion, his hard work, and the respect he showed even when he disagreed with someone. Since he had lost his wife years before, he was hardly ever seen at town parties, gatherings, or dinners. He would greet people, help anyone in need, and head back to his farm before anyone could drag him into too much conversation. But that morning, standing by that old fence, he had just said he'd marry her. Melanie tried to smile, but the shock was greater. Walter, he closed his eyes for a moment. Forget it. It was a foolish thing to say. It didn't sound foolish. Walter dropped the hammer onto the toolbox and stepped back. His face was tense. There was no joking in his eyes. There was fear. I shouldn't have said that, he said, his voice lower. You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. I shouldn't be putting those kinds of ideas into your head. Melanie felt a pang in her chest. She was 27 years old. Walter was 30 years older. Everyone in Willow Creek would notice that before they noticed anything else. The neighbors would gossip. Some would make jokes, others would pretend to be worried. And Walter knew that better than anyone. But she hadn't asked for the town's opinion. Melanie set the hammer down on the grass and stepped closer. And who said I need you to be younger? Walter looked up so quickly it was as if he'd received a jolt. For a few seconds he just stared at her. His breath caught. Melanie, don't say that just because I helped you with a fence. I'm not saying it because of the fence. Then why? She hesitated. His question hadn't been harsh. It had been frightened. Walter wasn't trying to push her away because he didn't feel anything. He was trying to push her away because he felt more than he believed he had the right to feel. Melanie looked at the repaired gate. She had spent almost 2 hours trying to fix it by herself. Walter had arrived quietly, saw she was struggling, and started to help. He didn't ask if she had the money to pay him. He didn't make a speech. He didn't treat her rundown farm like it was her problem alone. He just stayed. Because you always show up when I need you, she replied. Because you treat me like I'm capable, even when I make mistakes. Because you don't try to impress me. And because, when you're around, I don't feel like I have to pretend to be someone else. Walter turned even paler. He looked away as if he couldn't bear to hear it. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. You don't, his voice cracked. You don't know what it's like to wake up and realize the years have slipped away. You don't know what it's like to look at a woman like you and think about everything she still has to live, and then realize that maybe I won't be able to keep up. Melanie felt a tightness in her throat. This wasn't the reserved Walter she watched from afar in town. This was a man tired of protecting himself. A man who had spent too much time believing that love was a thing of the past. She took another step. Do you think I want someone to keep up with a checklist? Walter didn't answer. I want someone who's present, someone who doesn't run when things get hard, someone who has the courage to be honest with me. He looked at her again. And if I can't, then we talk. Like two adults. Walter let out a short, humorless laugh. You make everything sound so simple. No. I just don't want to complicate what's clear. The silence between them grew heavy. Walter brought his hand to his face. He seemed to be looking for a way out, a safe phrase, anything that would restore the distance that had existed between them before that morning. But Melanie didn't want to go back to the way things were. I'm not asking you to decide anything right now, she continued. Just don't pretend you didn't feel anything. Walter lowered his hand. His expression changed. It was almost imperceptible, but Melanie saw the exact moment he gave up trying to deny it. I felt it, he admitted. His voice was low, raspy. Melanie held her breath. Walter took a step closer, then another. They were too close now to pretend this was just a conversation between neighbors. He looked at her face, then at her lips, and stopped. The fear returned to his eyes. This could end up hurting you. And it could hurt you too. Walter took a deep breath. I've survived a lot of things, Melanie. Then maybe it's time to actually live something. The words hit Walter in a way she hadn't expected. He stood completely still. His eyes welled with emotion, but he didn't let a tear fall. He just looked at her as if no one had spoken to him that way in years. Melanie slowly raised her hand and touched his arm. Walter looked down at her hand. Then he closed his fingers over hers. His touch was firm yet gentle. He seemed on the verge of saying something important. Then a loud horn blasted at the entrance of the Harvey farm. Melanie diffused the moment and pulled her hand back. Walter turned immediately toward the dirt road. A black car was heading toward the house, kicking up dust behind its tires. It wasn't a typical vehicle for Willow Creek. It was too new, too big, and far too expensive for anyone to show up in without warning in these parts. The car stopped in front of the porch. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out wearing a light dress shirt, dark trousers, and shoes that weren't made for walking in mud. He held a black briefcase close to his side and looked directly at Melanie's house. Walter went rigid. Melanie noticed the shift in his expression. "Do you know this man?" Walter paused before replying. The stranger closed the car door and began walking toward them. "No," Walter said at last. "But nobody comes to a farm with a briefcase like that to deliver good news." Melanie felt her stomach tighten. The man passed through the newly repaired gate, looked at the two of them, and stopped a few feet away. "Melanie Harvey?" he asked. She nodded. He opened the briefcase. "My name is Nathan Cross. I've come from the capital regarding your property." Walter looked at Nathan, then at Melanie. And by the way, Nathan held that briefcase. They both understood that what had begun as an ordinary morning would never be simple again. Nathan Cross opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick document folded in three, with the state seal stamped at the top. "Perhaps it would be best for you to sit down before you read this." "I'll read it standing," Melanie said, reaching her hand out. He handed over the paper with a polite smile, the kind learned in boardrooms. He was 34 years old, had neatly trimmed hair, and possessed one of those presences that occupy a room without effort. Melanie scanned the first few lines. The more she read, the more her face hardened. "Is this an eminent domain seizure?" "State Route 9, Nathan pointed to a map printed on the second page. "A new highway connecting the capital to the northern county line. The current route cuts the Harvey farm right in half." Melanie felt the ground beneath her feet grow too firm, like when a body braces for a fall that hasn't yet happened. "In half. Right through your main orchard, unfortunately." Walter stepped forward and snatched the map from her hand without ceremony. His eyes ran over the red line drawn across the fields and then stopped. "That line doesn't stop on her property," he said, his voice low. "It keeps going. It crosses right over the boundary." Nathan hesitated for the first time. "Yes, it does. That's my land. It's Mr. Brooks's land, correct." Walter slowly looked up from the paper. There was nothing soft left on his face. "So you didn't come to deliver one piece of news. You came to deliver two." The silence that followed was different from the morning silence. That one had been full of unspoken words between two people. This one was harsh, cold, with the feel of letterhead. "How did nobody warn us?" Melanie snatched the map back. "A highway doesn't appear out of thin air. This takes years." "It does." Nathan tucked the pen into his shirt pocket. "And that's precisely why I came in person, instead of sending it by mail, as protocol dictates. Most people find out when the tractor is already at their doorstep. You still have time to contest it." Melanie and Walter exchanged a glance. It was quick, almost involuntary, but both understood the exact same thing in that instant. Whatever their differences, they now had a common enemy, and it came in the shape of a red line on a map. "How do we contest it?" Melanie asked. "Let's go inside." Nathan looked up at the October sky, then back at the porch. "This is going to take more than 5 minutes, and I work better with maps laid out on a table." That was how the three of them ended up on the porch of the old house all afternoon, with blueprints and documents scattered across the squeaking wooden table. Nathan explained each route with a patience that Melanie, against her own will, began to find useful. He didn't speak like someone just going through the motions. He asked questions, took notes, and pointed out loopholes in the state paperwork that even Walter hadn't noticed. Here, Nathan circled a paragraph. Their environmental assessment was rushed. If there's active and continuous agricultural production on these lands, the route has to be re-evaluated by law. That alone will delay the project for months. Months isn't a cancellation, Walter said. No, but it buys us time to fight properly. Walter crossed his arms and leaned against the porch column, just outside the circle of light falling on the table. From there, he watched. He watched the way Nathan leaned over the maps next to Melanie, how the two of them were almost the same age, how the young man spoke of that future filled with months and years, with the natural ease of someone who has all the time in the world ahead of him. And for the first time in a long time, Walter felt a tightness in his chest that had no name, but had an age. His own. He didn't say a word. Men like Walter don't say those things. He simply noted in a quiet corner of his mind that the architect from the capital was exactly the kind of man the whole town would think was right for Melanie. "Mr. Brooks," Nathan called out, and Walter snapped back from wherever his mind had drifted. "You're in this as much as she is. The petition is stronger if both farms file together." "I'm listening." Nathan straightened up, and that was when his tone shifted, becoming more cautious, like someone about to deliver the bad news. "There is just one detail," he said. "City Hall won't accept two separate petitions from neighbors. If your lands are going to fight together, they need to prove they were always, in some way, unified." He looked from one to the other. "You have to show a historical partnership of production, a record that the two farms operated in tandem in the past. An old inventory, a joint deed, any official document that links one to the other." The air on the porch shifted. Melanie looked at Walter, and what she saw on his face made her stomach sink. Walter had gone pale. "An inventory," he repeated softly. "Exactly. Without that document, both petitions will fall. And then there's no lawyer in the world who can stop the construction." Nathan watched him closely. "Do you have anything like that saved?" Walter paused before replying. He reached up to scratch the back of his neck, his gaze lost somewhere beyond the darkening fields, and Melanie realized he was searching through years inside his own head. "I did," he said at last. "You did?" "My father kept everything. The deeds, the crop records, the agreements with her grandfather." Walter swallowed hard. "There was an old inventory, yes. It linked both properties. I remember seeing it once when I was still a boy. And where is it now?" Nathan asked. Walter looked at Melanie, then out at the field, then down at the floor. "I have no idea. If you don't know where it is, then we're going to search until we find it," Melanie said, already pulling on her boots on the porch. That was how, the following morning, the two of them stood before a dusty hatch in the ceiling of Walter's hallway, a wooden ladder pulled down with a dry crack that echoed throughout the entire house. "Does this still hold weight?" Melanie asked, testing the first step. "It held my father, and he weighed twice what you do." "That's not very reassuring." Walter climbed up first, pushing the hatch open with his shoulder. A cloud of dust descended onto his face before he could move away, and he sneezed 3 times in a row, so hard that he nearly lost his footing on the ladder. "Classy," Melanie commented, climbing up behind him. "Just wait until you breathe in there." She didn't have to wait long. As soon as her feet touched the wooden floorboards of the attic, the smell of mold and old paper hit her nose, and she sneezed too, bumping her head lightly against a low beam. "Ow. Watch the ceiling." "Now you tell me." The attic was a labyrinth of stacked boxes, furniture covered in yellowed sheets and rusted metal trunks. Walter switched on a flashlight and began searching through a pile near the window, while Melanie opened a cardboard box filled with chipped porcelain plates. "Walter, did your father collect broken plates?" "My mother collected them. My father just never had the heart to throw them away." "That explains a lot about you." "It explains nothing. It explains that you don't know how to throw things away either." Walter stopped, looked at her over the top of a box, and couldn't deny it. They kept searching, each at one end of the attic, exchanging dry comments about absurd relics. A cowboy hat eaten by moths, a collection of empty coffee cans, and a family portrait so faded that it was impossible to recognize anyone's face. It was in front of an iron trunk, pushed against the back wall, that the two of them accidentally bumped into each other. Walter went to open the lid at the exact same instant. Melanie reached down to pull the rusted latch, and their hands met on top of the cold metal. Neither of them drew their hand back right away. "Sorry," Walter said softly, but he didn't move. "You don't have to be." They stayed like that for a second longer than any explanation could justify, until Walter finally unlocked the latch and lifted the lid. Inside, resting on top of a stack of old notebooks, was a book bound in dark leather, worn at the edges. Walter recognized it instantly, and his face changed completely. "That's Ruth's diary." Melanie took a step back. "Do you want to stop here?" "No." Walter picked up the diary with both hands, as carefully as if he were holding something alive. "It's been a long time." He opened to the first page, and the small, slanted handwriting filled line after line, chronicling the daily life of a woman who wrote about her husband with a tenderness that made Melanie feel as though she were trespassing on something sacred. Walter turned the pages slowly, his face growing tighter, until he suddenly stopped on one of the final sheets. He fell silent for a long time. "Walter?" He didn't answer. He just kept reading, his eyes scanning the page, his free hand gripping the edge of the diary tightly. Melanie stepped closer and read over his shoulder. Ruth had written in her final weeks of life a direct request to her husband that when he was ready, he should let the sadness fade away little by little, that he should laugh again without guilt, and that he should build something new without feeling as though he were betraying what they had built together. Walter's breathing grew heavy. A single tear rolled down, silent, and he didn't even try to hide it. Melanie didn't say a word. She just wrapped her arm around his shoulders, firm and unhurried, letting him cry the way he needed to, without letting it become a bigger moment than it already was. She knew. Walter finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "She knew I'd need to hear this one day. She loved you very much." She did. They stood like that for another moment. The silence of the attic different from all the other silences that day. It was then that, as he closed the diary, a yellowed piece of paper slipped from inside the cover and fell onto the wooden floor between their feet. Walter bent down and picked it up. "This is..." He carefully unfolded the paper, his eyes running across the handwritten lines. His face began to change, the sadness of seconds before giving way to a growing confusion. "Is it the inventory?" Melanie asked, her heart racing. "It is. So we found it. We did." Walter didn't look relieved. He seemed to grow paler by the second, his eyes locked on a clause in the middle of the page, reading and rereading it. "But there's something else here, Melanie." "What?" "According to this," he said slowly, "the Harvey farm has a massive debt accumulated over years with the Brooks farm, and right below was a stamped clause stating that if the debt wasn't cleared, the farm would be taken as collateral. That means..." Melanie began but couldn't finish. Walter finished it for her. "That your farm, by law, is mine." Melanie didn't move. She remained standing in the middle of the attic, staring at the paper in Walter's hand as if, by looking at it long enough, the words would reorganize themselves and say something else. "Melanie." 3 months. Her voice sounded strange, almost too calm. "I buried my grandfather, left everything behind, came here, and spent 3 months clearing weeds from an orchard that was already yours. It's not like that. It's written right there." Walter took a step toward her. "It's written on a paper that was stuffed inside a trunk for 40 years. I'm never going to use this. Never. You don't have to worry about a thing." She raised her eyes, and there was a weariness in them that none of her jokes could mask. "The problem isn't you using it, Walter. It's that it exists now." She went down the ladder without waiting for an answer. Walter was left up there with the inventory in his hands, hearing her footsteps cross the hallway and the front door slam. He didn't call after her. Not because he didn't want to, but because, for the first time since they had met, he didn't know what to say. The following morning, when Walter pushed open the door of the general store, the hum of conversation stopped as if someone had pulled the radio plug. He paused with his hand still on the doorknob. Every eye in the place was on him. "Good morning," he said, because it was the only polite thing that occurred to him. Nobody replied. It was old Doris Pratt behind the counter who broke the ice with the delicacy of a brick. Is it true the Harvey farm is yours now, Walter Brooks? He took a bag of flour from the shelf. It isn't. But there's a document. There's an old piece of paper. It's not the same thing. Old paper is worth more than new words, grumbled Mr. Kemp from the back. If the debt exists, it exists. Your family sweated for that land. You've got a right to it. And what was she going to do, poor thing? Cut in another voice. End up with nothing? Poor thing, my foot. Doris crossed her arms. Did you see the two of them fixing that fence together? Some girls know exactly where they're stepping. A debt that size disappears real fast the moment the lady becomes mistress of the house. The entire store seemed to inhale at the same time. Walter set the flour bag on the counter slowly. Doris, I'm just saying what everyone is thinking. Then think quieter. He paid, took the bag, and walked out. But those words kept hammering in his head all the way to his truck. And Walter knew small towns well. By now, half the town probably knew the story. By the end of the day, the other half would know too, and would likely hear a very different version of what had actually happened. An hour later, Melanie parked right in front of the store, walked in with her chin held high, and went straight to the counter with a tin of coffee in her hand. The silence returned. Good morning, Mrs. Pratt. Melanie smiled broadly, without a drop of shame. Just the coffee, and you can start getting the change ready because, from what they're saying around town, it's the last bit of money I have left in the world. Someone coughed. Oh, and before you ask, she continued, turning to face the entire store. Yes, I fixed a fence with Mr. Brooks. I held the hammer and everything. I confess it was a brilliant plan to seduce a 57-year-old man and take his farm. You know how it is. Nothing excites a widower more than a woman hitting her finger with a hammer. A young man in the back let out a laugh and choked. Doris turned red to the roots of her hair. I didn't mean that. Yes, you did. Melanie took her change. But it's fine. In a town this size, you either laugh or you go crazy. I chose to laugh. Good morning, and she walked out, her step firm and her heart beating faster than she let show. She arrived at her farm near lunchtime and found Nathan's black car already parked in front of the house, with a new folder of documents open on the hood. You're early, she said. I arrived yesterday, actually. He closed the folder. And before noon I'd already heard 3 different versions of your love life. Any of them good? None of them fair. Just then, the two of them heard the engine of the old truck coming up the dirt road. Walter got out of the vehicle without turning off the engine. He crossed the yard with the inventory in hand, his face that of a man who had spent the entire morning deciding something and had finally made up his mind. Walter, what? He stopped in front of her. He raised the document in the air, between the 3 of them, in full view of Nathan, in full view of anyone who cared to look. This town can say whatever it wants about me. His voice was deep, steady, almost harsh. But it won't talk about your honor because of a piece of paper, and he tore it. He tore the inventory down the middle, and then, again, and threw the pieces to the ground. Melanie stood in disbelief. You just tore up a fortune. I just tore up a problem. Nathan, however, wasn't looking at either of them. He was crouched on the ground, picking up the pieces with a strange urgency, fitting them together between his fingers. Nathan? Melanie called out. He didn't reply. He held one of the fragments up to the sunlight, turning the paper slowly, and when he finally spoke, his voice had lost all the politeness of an architect from the Capitol. Mr. Brooks, he got up, holding the piece with the signature. Who did you say signed this? My father. Why? Nathan looked at the paper, then at them. Because this signature is erased underneath, he swallowed hard. This document is a fake. Fake how? Walter asked. Fake as in someone erasing one signature and writing another on top of it, Nathan said. I don't know who. I don't know when. But I know that the pen that signed underneath is not the same one that signed on top. My father kept this his entire life. Maybe your father never knew. Melanie sat down on the porch step. So someone went into that attic, she said softly. Someone took the real inventory and left a lie in its place. The 3 of them looked at each other, and that was the question no one could answer for the next 7 days. The week dragged by. Walter turned the attic upside down once more, this time alone. Melanie searched through the dusty archives at City Hall, made calls to registry offices, and piled the kitchen table high with papers. Nothing. Only one name began to surface, always at the bottom of the old documents, written in the same cramped handwriting. Elias Crane, the attorney who had managed both farms for 30 years, before vanishing off the face of the earth. And Nathan? Nathan started showing up every single day. He would arrive in the morning with increasingly creative excuses, a map he needed to double-check, a form only she could sign. He spent hours on the porch, talking, laughing at her jokes, and laughing for real, which was worse. One Wednesday, he arrived holding a handful of wildflowers. "What's this?" "Flowers." "I know that. I'm asking what they're for." Nathan gave the most disarming smile in the world. "I saw them by the side of the road on my way over. Thought they were pretty. Thought of you." Melanie took the flowers, not knowing what to say. "Thank you." What she didn't see was the old truck parked up at the bend of the road, the spot that overlooked the entire farm. Walter saw everything. He saw the black car. He saw the flowers. He saw her laughter. That day he didn't visit, nor the next, nor the day after that. Melanie noticed it the first morning, pretended she didn't the second, and by the third she was looking toward the property line every 10 minutes, hoping to see that hat appear on the other side of the oak gate. She could have walked across the field and knocked on his door. She could have. But something inside her, pride, fear, or both, held her back. If he wanted to, he would come. He always came. But Walter didn't. On Friday, Nathan appeared again and set his folder on the kitchen table. "Melanie, I need to be frank with you. When someone says that, it's never good news. The state won't wait. If we don't present a valid petition with a valid document, the route gets approved at the end of the month." He looked into her eyes. "You lose the farm to the asphalt, and Mr. Brooks does too." The air fled her lungs. "I know. It doesn't look like you do. It looks like you're waiting for something." Melanie didn't answer, because she was. The harvest ball took place every autumn in the Whitmore barn, and was, without competition, the biggest social event in Willow Creek. Yellow string lights hung from the rafters, tables loaded with apple pie, a band of 5 old men who had been playing the exact same set for 20 years, and nobody ever complained. And that Saturday, when Melanie walked in, the entire barn went quiet. She had swapped her boots for a dark blue dress that swayed with the breeze, and her hair was down for the first time since she'd arrived in town. The very same mouths that had spent the week gossiping about her now couldn't find a single word to say. "Miss Harvey." Nathan appeared before her and extended his hand. "May I have the honor?" She hesitated for half a second, and she accepted. Nathan danced well. He danced the way big city men learn to at expensive weddings. Light, confident, never stepping on toes. He cracked quiet jokes about the farmers' hats, spun Melanie at just the right moment, and made her laugh 3 times in a row. From the corner of the room, leaning against a wooden beam, Walter watched, a glass in his hand that he hadn't brought to his lips a single time. "You gonna stand there all night?" asked Frank Whitmore, stopping beside him. "I'm fine right here." "You look miserable right here." Walter finally took a sip. "Look at him, Frank. Look at him, and then look at me." "I'm looking." "He's 34 years old." "So what?" Frank spat to the side. "My father married my mother when he was 60. She was 22 years younger. They stayed together until their final days. You know the only foolish mistake he made?" "What was that?" "Waiting 2 years out of fear." Frank slapped his shoulder. 2 years, Walter. He used to cry when he talked about it. The music changed. A slow waltz, the kind that fills the barn with silence. Walter looked at his glass, looked at the dance floor, and he went. He crossed the middle of the dance floor, with the entire town watching, and stopped in front of the pair. "Excuse me," he said to Nathan, without taking his eyes off her. "This one's mine." Nathan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He took a step back. Walter extended his hand. Melanie looked at that calloused hand, and her heart beat so loud she was certain the band would lose the rhythm. She placed her hand in his, and the world shrunk until it fit right there. They said nothing. They didn't need to. He guided her with a quiet confidence, the palm of his hand resting on her back, and Melanie let her forehead nearly touch his shoulder. Almost. His fingers squeezed hers once, gently, and she squeezed back. "You vanished," she murmured. "I know. Don't do that again." Walter swallowed hard. "Melanie, The entire barn plunged into darkness. A crash outside, a flash of white, and the rain poured down all at once on the roof as if the sky had torn open. The string lights all went out. Screams, nervous laughter, chairs scraping. Melanie felt Walter's hand slip from hers. Walter? Then a hand gripped hers. Firm, resolute. It pulled her through the crowd in the darkness, to the back of the barn where the roar of the rain was louder than anything. The lights flickered back on with a snap, and Melanie looked at the man beside her. It wasn't Walter. Nathan was still holding her hand, his chest rising and falling quickly, his eyes locked onto hers. "I can't pretend anymore," he said. "Melanie, I'm falling in love with you." She opened her mouth. No sound came. Across the room, amidst the crowd settling back down, she saw Walter's hat disappearing through the door into the rain. Melanie pulled her hand away. "I have to go." "Melanie, I'll think about it." Her voice trembled. "I promise I'll think about it." And she ran out after Walter, but when she reached the parking lot, his old truck was already gone. She stood there, alone, not knowing what to do. Then she got back in her car and drove home in silence, her heart heavy. Melanie had barely reached her porch when a gust of wind ripped away part of the roof. The crash was so loud she ducked by instinct as 2 roof tiles flew across the yard and disappeared into the apple trees. Oh my God. She ran inside and slammed the door. The house was dark, the power having cut out during the night, her phone had no signal, and rainwater was already leaking through an ever-expanding spot on the living room ceiling. The storm that started at the dance had worsened overnight. Trees had fallen across both roads in Willow Creek, and the battery-powered radio reported that no one would enter or leave that part of the valley until road crews cleared the way. Melanie placed a bucket under the leak, but 5 seconds later another one appeared. She fetched another bucket, and when she returned, she heard wood cracking above her head. No. She climbed up 2 steps of the stairs and saw water seeping through the ceiling. She needed to cover the roof. So Melanie grabbed a tarp from the barn, dragged a ladder to the side of the house, and began to climb in the pouring rain. She had just reached the 3rd step when she heard a shout. "Get down from there!" Melanie nearly fell from the shock. Walter was walking through the orchard wearing a raincoat, a rope coiled over his shoulder, and a toolbox in hand. She stood still. She hadn't called, nor would she have been able to. Even so, he was here. "Walter? Get down. The roof is open. I saw it from my place." "I can tie the tarp down," Melanie said, her voice panicked. A clap of thunder exploded so close that Melanie climbed down very quickly, visibly shaken. Walter took the rope off his shoulder and inspected the house. He didn't ask about Nathan, nor did he mention the dance. Melanie decided to do the same. Then Walter tied the rope around his waist, secured the other end to a thick tree, and began to climb. "Have you gone crazy?" Melanie yelled. "Probably." "It's raining." Walter stopped on the ladder and looked at her. "Thanks for the update." Melanie almost laughed, but at that moment, another section of the roof gave way, and they both returned to the task immediately. For nearly an hour, Walter worked on the roof while Melanie held the ladder and passed up the materials he needed. The rain beat down on them, and the wind made every movement difficult, but when he finally managed to secure the tarp, he climbed down completely soaked. Melanie grabbed a towel and handed it to him. "You could have been hurt. You were climbing up alone." "That doesn't answer my question." "It answers it well enough." Walter entered the house and found 4 buckets scattered across the living room. "How many leaks are there?" "4. Right then, a drop fell directly on his shoulder. Melanie pointed. "Now it's 5. Walter looked at the ceiling. "Great. Did you say great?" "I'm trying to be positive. It doesn't suit you." This time Walter laughed. It was brief, but enough to ease the day's tension a little. They spent the rest of the afternoon protecting the furniture and boarding up 2 windows that the wind had damaged. While Walter repaired the back door, Melanie dried the hallway and emptied the buckets whenever they filled up. By the time the rain finally let up, it was already getting dark. Walter tried to use his phone, but there was still no signal. "The roads are still blocked," Melanie said. "You're not crossing the field in the dark. My place is close by. There are trees falling. Melanie just spent an hour bossing me around. Now it's my turn." Walter put his phone away. "Fine." She hadn't expected it to be so easy. "Fine?" "Yes." Just like that? You want to argue? I was prepared to. Save it for tomorrow. Melanie smiled and walked to the kitchen, but as soon as she opened the pantry, her smile vanished. We have a problem. Walter appeared at the door. Another one? 1 can of beans, half a pack of pasta, 2 potatoes, and something in a jar that I don't have the courage to identify. Walter picked up the jar and inspected it. Pickles. Melanie took a closer look. Was that a cucumber once? Once. She lit 3 candles and set a pot on the gas stove. While Walter chopped the potatoes, Melanie tried to find some way to combine the ingredients into a decent meal. My grandfather used to make dinner out of anything, she commented. Did you inherit that talent? Melanie looked down at the pot. We'll find out in 20 minutes. A little later, she set 2 bowls on the table, and Walter tasted the first spoonful. Melanie waited for his reaction. Well? He chewed slowly. It's hot, Walter. That's a point in its favor. Tell the truth. You put pickles in the pasta. I was under pressure. And the beans? Protein. Walter tasted another spoonful before answering. Interesting. Is that the polite word for horrible? Yes. Melanie started to laugh, and Walter tried to keep a straight face, but ended up laughing too. Even so, the 2 of them ate. When they finished, the house was freezing. Walter lit the fireplace, and they pulled their chairs close to the hearth. For a few minutes, they spoke only about the damage. The barn needed to be checked. The apple trees on the north side had likely lost branches, and the tarp wouldn't hold up through another heavy storm. Then Melanie decided to ask, "Why did you leave?" Walter knew that question would come at some point. I thought I should. That's not what I asked. He stared at the fire for a while before answering. I saw Nathan holding your hand. Because he pulled me in the dark. Then he spoke with you. Melanie understood immediately. Did you hear? I didn't need to. So you left without knowing what I answered. Walter didn't try to defend himself, and that irritated Melanie more than a bad excuse. I ran after you. He turned his face to her. You did? All the way to the parking lot. Walter hadn't known that, but Melanie continued before he could speak. You were already gone. I thought, that's the problem. You assume and you run. The words hit Walter because they were true. At the dance, he had made a decision for her once again. This time, however, he didn't repeat the same speech about age. I was wrong. Melanie waited for something more, but nothing came. Just that? Do you want me to make up a better excuse? No. Then I was wrong. The answer made Melanie feel less irritated. Nathan said he's falling in love with me. Walter nodded. I figured. I told him I'd think about it. That hurt, and Melanie noticed. Even so, Walter didn't stand up or try to flee. And will you? I already have. Now it was he who waited. Melanie stood up from her chair and approached the fireplace. Nathan is a good man, intelligent, funny. He didn't do anything wrong. I know. And maybe it would be easier to like him. Walter looked down, but Melanie turned to face him and continued, except I don't stand looking at the property line waiting for Nathan to show up. Walter raised his face. I didn't spend 3 days irritated because Nathan didn't visit. And I didn't run out into a rainstorm after him either. Walter rose slowly. Melanie? No. Now you're going to listen to me to the end. He fell silent, and she continued. You got here today before I asked for help. Again. And I finally understood why that gets to me so much. Walter waited. Because you always show up. The answer dismantled his last defense, and Walter stepped closer. I don't know how to do this right. What? Start over. Melanie understood he wasn't talking about the farm. Neither do I. You seem to. I almost put pickles in the beans. Walter smiled. You put them in the pasta. Exactly. Don't trust me. He laughed softly, and the tension eased for a moment. Even so, neither of them moved away. Walter stood close enough for Melanie to realize he wasn't looking for an exit. For the first time, he was there because he had chosen to stay. When my wife died, he said, I organized the whole house in 2 days. I packed up the clothes, paid the bills, and handled the funeral. Everyone said I was strong. Melanie listened without interrupting. But the truth is, I was doing chores because I didn't know what to do with myself. After that, I just kept going. Working was easier. And now? Walter looked directly at her. Now I'm afraid of wanting something again. The anger Melanie still carried from the dance disappeared. Because this was new. Walter wasn't running away from age. He was admitting he was still afraid of losing someone. Melanie took his hand. I can't promise that nothing bad will happen. I know. But I can promise that if you run again, I'm crossing the field to get you." "In the rain?" "Especially in the rain." Walter smiled, and shortly after grew serious. Melanie did too. He carefully placed his hand on her face, giving her time to pull away, but Melanie remained where she was. Walter leaned in, and she closed eyes. Then the crash was so violent they both threw themselves to the side. A whole section of the living room ceiling collapsed. Wood, plaster, and dust fell onto the sofa. Melanie screamed, and Walter pulled her close to the fireplace, shielding her head until the noise finally ceased. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I think so." Walter looked at the ruined living room, while Melanie was still clinging to his shirt. "Walter?" "Yes? Did my house just stop you from kissing me?" He looked at her. "It seems so." Melanie pointed to the ruined ceiling. "I knew this house had problems," Walter laughed, still shaken by the scare. That night, there was nothing they could do. Walter inspected the structure and forbade Melanie from entering the living room again. The two of them slept little, each in a separate room, while the rain slowly dwindled. The following morning, they began to clear the debris. After nearly 2 hours of work, Melanie pulled a broken board near the wall and noticed something metallic showing between the beams. "Walter." He dropped the bag of rubble. "What is it?" Melanie cleared away more wood and found a small iron box hidden inside the wall. Walter knelt beside her. "That was in there?" It was. The lock had broken when the ceiling collapsed, and Melanie managed to open the lid. Inside were documents wrapped in fabric. Walter picked up the first one and read it once. Then, he went back to the beginning and read it again. "Melanie?" "What?" He handed her the paper. It was the original inventory of the 2 farms, with legitimate signatures, official seals, and records of joint production spanning decades. Melanie sat on the floor. "This saves the properties." "It does." She laughed in disbelief and hugged Walter so hard she nearly knocked him over onto the rubble. "We did it. The house did it." "Don't ruin the moment." Walter smiled, but then noticed another document at the bottom of the box. It was a yellowed envelope, sealed with wax. On the front, 2 last names were written by hand. Harvey and Brooks. Walter opened the envelope and Melanie began reading over his shoulder. The smile vanished from both of their faces. It wasn't another inventory. It was a will. And the first clause stated that the 2 farms should never have been separated. "Walter, this doesn't save the farms." "How doesn't it?" "It says the lands should never have been separated." "Read the last condition." Walter went back to the document. This time, he went straight to the passage Melanie was pointing to. The protection over the lands would only remain valid as long as the 2 properties functioned as a single-family entity under a single last name. Walter finished reading and grew serious. A single last name. "Harvey and Brooks," Melanie said. "We're still 2 families." The 2 went back to the documents found inside the wall. The will confirmed that Melanie's grandfather and Walter's father had been majority partners for decades. The farms shared production, equipment, and land rights. Legally, they should never have been separated, but someone had divided the properties anyway. And now, to use that document against the highway, they needed to prove that the farms would operate as one again. "Did your father never talk about this?" Melanie asked. "Never. Not even about my grandfather?" "He spoke of him, but he only said they were partners." Melanie sat among the debris. "So someone forged the inventory, separated the lands, and hid the will inside a wall." Walter picked up the real inventory. "Elias Crane? Do you think it was him?" "I think we need to find this man." Before Melanie could reply, the sound of an engine came from the driveway. Nathan's black car stopped in front of the house. He got out with his leather briefcase under his arm, and, when he saw the tarp covering the roof, quickened his pace. "What happened?" "The house lost an argument with the storm," Melanie replied. Nathan looked at the ruined living room. "Are you both all right?" "We are, but we found something." Melanie placed the will in his hands. Nathan began reading while still standing. When he reached the last clause, he went back a few lines and checked again. "Where was this?" "Inside the wall," Walter answered. "Along with the original inventory." Nathan raised his head. "You found the original?" Walter handed him the document. Nathan walked into the kitchen and spread everything out on the table. For the next few minutes, he compared dates, signatures, and records while Melanie waited, growing increasingly impatient. "Nathan." He kept reading. Nathan, say something. The inventory is authentic. Melanie felt immediate relief. Then we can stop the highway. Maybe. That word put an end to her relief. Maybe? Nathan pointed to the will. This proves the two farms formed a single operation. It's very strong evidence against the current route. The problem is this condition. A last name, Walter said. Exactly. Melanie pulled up a chair. So we register the farms together again. That would take weeks. We don't have weeks. I know. Nathan closed his folder and fell silent for a few seconds. The state inspectors arrive tomorrow. Melanie stood up from her chair. Tomorrow? At 9 in the morning. You said the inspection would be at the end of the month. They moved it up. Why? They didn't tell me. Walter approached the table. Did someone pressure the department? Nathan looked at him. It's possible. Melanie felt her desperation grow. They had spent days searching for proof, faced a storm, and found the documents by chance inside a wall. Now, when they finally had a shot, the state was moving up the inspection. How much time do we have? She asked. To present a petition capable of stopping everything? Until the inspectors arrive. Then find a way. Nathan fell silent. Melanie noticed. You've already found a way. I found a possibility. What is it? Nathan looked at Walter before answering. If the properties become part of the same family again, I can request an immediate suspension of the inspection while we do the legal reorganization. Melanie frowned. Become part of the same family how? Nathan hesitated. Walter understood first. Marriage. Melanie looked at him, then at Nathan. Are you saying I need to get married by tomorrow? I'm saying that's the only quick solution I found. That's crazy. I know. Good. Nathan didn't smile. I spent the morning talking to lawyers and looking for another way out. I didn't find one. Walter rested his hands on the table. If there's a marriage, is the inspection canceled? Suspended. And we'll have time to register a new farming operation under a single last name. And if there isn't? Nathan answered bluntly. Tomorrow the inspectors proceed with the process. Melanie stepped away from the table, so we find the right documents and we can still lose everything. Yes. Nathan's answer was harsh, but she needed to hear the truth. He closed the will and walked over to Melanie. Marry me. No, Nathan seemed surprised by the speed of it. You didn't even think. Because you just asked me to marry you in my kitchen with half of the living room destroyed. I know where we are. Then you also know this is absurd. I do. But tomorrow at 9, 2 inspectors are going to walk through that gate and could start the process that takes these lands from you. Melanie grew serious. Nathan continued. I'm not trying to buy a chance with you. What I said at the dance is still true, but this is something else. I'm offering a solution that can protect the farm. Marriage isn't a form, Nathan. I know. It doesn't seem like it. Melanie, I'm 34 years old. I know exactly what I'm proposing. His firmness surprised her. Nathan wasn't making an impulsive declaration. He truly believed that was the best way out. We can create a new firm under my last name, he explained. As soon as the inspection is suspended, we resolve the rest calmly. And the marriage? We decide what to do with it later. You talk as if it were simple. It's not simple. It's urgent. Walter, who had remained quiet, asked the question Melanie didn't want to hear. If she marries you, what is the chance of saving the farm? Nathan thought before answering. Very high. And if she doesn't? Walter, answer. Nathan looked directly at him. Tomorrow the inspection continues. Walter nodded slowly. Then there is no choice. Melanie turned to him. Yes, there is. You heard what he said. I heard him, and I also heard you promise you'd stop deciding things for me. I'm not deciding. It sure feels like it. Walter pointed to the documents. I'm looking at what's in front of us. And I'm looking at you. Nathan stepped away from the table. He didn't want to be part of that side of the conversation, but he couldn't pretend he didn't understand either. Walter felt the weight of those words, but this time he wasn't thinking about his own age or what the town would say. He was thinking about the Harvey farm, the house that had almost collapsed that night. The apple trees Melanie had been trying to save since she arrived, and the possibility of her losing everything because she wouldn't be able to accept Nathan as long as Walter remained by her side. Melanie, you fought for these lands since the day you arrived. Don't change the subject. I'm not. Then say what you really want to say. Walter paused. Nathan can save your farm. And you. The question hit him. I can't. That's not what I asked. Walter didn't answer. Nathan closed his folder. I'll give you two some time to talk. Melanie turned to him. Nathan, I need your answer by 7. If you accept, I still have to prepare the documents and talk to the lawyer. And if I say no, Nathan was silent for a few seconds. Tomorrow I'll be here just the same, and I'll try everything I can. His answer made it clear why Melanie liked him. Nathan wasn't a bad man trying to take advantage of her desperation, and that was precisely what made the decision so difficult. He left. As soon as the car vanished down the road, Melanie went back to the kitchen. Walter was already gathering his tools. Don't even think about it. I need to check my house. Walter. Melanie, you have a decision to make. I know. Then make it. And what are you gonna do? Vanish while I think? Walter closed the box. I won't interfere. Your existence isn't interference. He stopped. Melanie stepped closer. Yesterday you said you wouldn't run again, and I'm not running. Then stay. Walter wanted to. After the night they had spent together, staying would be the easiest thing. But Nathan had given Melanie a concrete way out, and Walter believed that as long as he was around, she would never be able to truly consider that option. I need to go home. Melanie realized that pushing him at that moment would only make Walter shut down. Fine, he looked up, surprised. Fine? Go. Walter picked up the toolbox. Melanie, go, Walter. He left. In the hours that followed, Melanie tried to focus on the documents, but couldn't. Nathan's proposal made sense. It was quick, legal, and could save both properties. Besides, Nathan was a good man. She knew that. But every time she tried to imagine her own signature on a marriage certificate next to his name, she remembered Walter crossing the orchard in the middle of the storm. At 6:20, Melanie gave up trying to decide on her own. Nathan was expecting an answer in 40 minutes. She needed to talk to Walter first. Melanie crossed the orchard and passed through the oak gate. The ground was still covered in mud, and broken branches littered the path, but she pressed on to his house. The front door was open. Walter? No reply. Melanie walked in. That was when she spotted 2 suitcases near the stairs. She stopped. Walter appeared in the hallway carrying a cardboard box. What is this? He paused before answering. Melanie pointed at the suitcases. Did you pack your things? I'm leaving Willow Creek for a while. Desperation came right along with anger. You promised you wouldn't run again. I'm not running. There are 2 suitcases at your door, Walter. I know. Then explain to me what you call this. Walter set the box on the floor. Nathan can save your farm. And what does that have to do with you leaving? Walter finally faced Melanie. Because as long as I'm here, you won't be able to say yes to him. And tomorrow morning, you need to say it. Walter picked up the suitcase. Melanie remained standing in front of him, hoping he would change his mind. But he walked past her, down the steps of the porch, and loaded the luggage into his truck. Then he drove away. Melanie felt the anger swell inside her. Fine, Walter. She ran to her own car. If you want to run, you're going to have to do it looking at my face. Walter had already vanished down the road by the time Melanie left the farm. She drove to Willow Creek, and as soon as she turned onto Main Street, she saw Frank Whitmore closing up his shop. She slammed the brakes near the curb. Frank, have you seen Walter? He passed by about 20 minutes ago. Where was he heading? The train station. Said he was going to Chicago. Melanie closed her eyes for a second. Of course. Did something happen? It's about to. She stepped on the gas. When she arrived at the station, the train was already parked at the platform. The conductor was announcing boarding, and a few people were walking with luggage toward the train cars. Melanie searched among them. Then she saw Walter. Walter Brooks. He stopped immediately. Several people looked at Melanie, but she didn't care. She crossed the platform and went straight up to him. Walter could tell by her expression that this conversation was going to be very different from their previous ones. Melanie? Shut up, he blinked, surprised. I told you to be quiet. Walter obeyed. Melanie stood before him. You're going to listen to me. And this time, you're not going to decide what I think before I finish. I was only trying to. Walter. He quieted down again. Melanie was angry, but she hadn't come here to beg. Oleg. She was tired of chasing a man who always found a different reason to withdraw as soon as things between them progressed. I'm 27 years old, she said. I'm an adult. I run a farm, I pay my bills, and I'm fighting the state so I don't lose my home. So stop treating me like I don't have the capacity to decide what's best for myself." Walter grew serious. "I've never thought you were incapable. Then stop deciding for me." "I'm not." Melanie pointed to his suitcase. "You're leaving so that I'll accept Nathan. That is exactly deciding for me. He can save the farm." "I know. Then you understand why." "No, I understand his proposal. What I don't understand is why you keep thinking you have the right to choose my response." Walter tried to keep his composure. "Because I know what's at stake, and I don't." "That's not what I said." "But that's how you act." Melanie took a step closer. "First, you thought you were too old for me. Then you decided the town would talk. When Nathan showed up, you vanished for 3 days. At the dance, you left without hearing my answer. Now you've packed 2 suitcases because you decided I need to marry another man." Walter felt every word. There was no exaggeration in what Melanie was saying. That was precisely the problem. "Stop making excuses," she continued. "Every time I tear one down, you come up with another. They aren't excuses." "Then what are they?" Walter looked at the train. "Fear." The answer made Melanie lower her voice, but not her anger. "Fear of what, Walter?" He paused. "Of making you unhappy." Melanie waited. This time, Walter spoke. "You might want a family. I might. Children. Maybe. You might want to travel, see the country, do things that I no longer have the 20-year-old energy to do." Melanie furrowed her brow. "Are you sick?" "No." "Is there something you haven't told me?" "No." "Then why are you speaking as if you need a nurse just to board the train?" Walter's expression tightened. "Melanie, I'm serious." "So am I. You're 57, not 107. An elderly woman waiting nearby tried to hide a smile. Walter lowered his voice. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Turn it into a joke." "I'm trying to understand, because in your head, apparently I need a 30-year-old man who runs across the country, wants 6 kids, and knows how to use every feature on a phone." "I didn't say that." "Good, because that sounds exhausting." Walter almost smiled. But Melanie didn't. "I'm serious now. Very serious." His smile vanished. "If I want to have children, I decide. If I want to travel, I decide. If I want to spend the next 10 years tending to apple trees on that farm, I decide that too. And if I choose a man 29 years older than me, guess who decides?" Walter already knew the answer. "You." Finally, the station worker announced there were only a few minutes left before departure. Walter glanced quickly at the train car. Melanie noticed, and something inside her hardened. "Go," he turned to her. "What?" "Get on the train." Walter was confused. "Melanie, you want to leave that badly? Go, but don't say you're doing this for me." "I am." "No, you're doing it for yourself." The words hit Walter. Melanie continued with a coldness he had never seen in her before. "It's easier to get on this train than to admit you like me. It's easier to hand me over to Nathan than to run the risk of staying. So go, Walter. Just have the courage to call it what it is. You think I don't like you? I think you're too much of a coward to admit it." Walter froze. Anger flushed his face. "Watch it, Melanie." "Watch what? The truth? You don't know what you're saying." "Then you say it." "What? That you like me." Walter opened his mouth. Not a single word came out. Melanie let out a short, humorless laugh. "Just as I thought." She turned away. Walter grabbed her arm. "Wait." Melanie looked down at his hand. Walter let go instantly. "I don't know how to say these things the way you do. I've noticed. That doesn't mean I don't." "Don't what?" Walter froze again. Melanie lost the last of her patience. "My God, Walter, stop making excuses and just marry me, you stubborn old man." The entire platform seemed to hear. Walter's eyes widened. Melanie realized she had spoken too loudly as well, but there was no reason to back down now. "That's right," she continued, still angry. "Can't you see that I'm in love with you? And you're in love with me too. So stop running, stop planning my life, and just own up to it once and for all." Walter didn't reply. Surprise had completely erased the tension from his face. Melanie crossed her arms. "Say something. You called me old." She looked outraged. "Is that what you heard?" Walter smiled. It wasn't a shy or nervous smile. For the first time since Melanie had known him, he seemed to have stopped looking for a problem. Then he dropped his suitcase and walked toward her. Melanie still tried to speak. "Walter, I'm really—" He kissed her. Melanie went quiet instantly. "Tut!" Walter held her face and kissed her with an intensity that didn't match the man who had spent weeks choosing every word. and Melanie responded without hesitation, grabbing his shirt and completely forgetting about the people on the platform. The lady standing nearby clapped. Someone else joined in. Walter pulled back just enough to look at Melanie. "This is your fault," he whispered. "What?" "Now the whole town will know before Frank." Melanie almost laughed. "Walter." "I know." He grew serious. "I love you." Melanie's anger vanished. Walter had finally said it. No excuses, no talk about age, no trying to decide her future. "Took you long enough," Melanie replied. "I was trying to make sure." "Of what?" "That you were as stubborn as you seemed. And you're worse." She smiled. Walter held both of her hands. "Melanie Harvey, will you marry me?" She stayed quiet. Walter continued. "For love, and also to protect our farms together." Melanie felt her eyes fill with tears, but her smile appeared first. "Are you asking me to marry you at a train station? You asked me first. I was angry. It still counts." "Walter? Melanie, will you?" She kissed him again. Walter waited for the answer when she pulled back. "Yes, yes, yes, you stubborn old man." Walter pulled her close again. The train left without him. A few minutes later, the two of them left the station with Walter's suitcases back in the bed of the truck. On the way back to the farm, Melanie mentioned that she still had to give Nathan an answer. "I'll speak to him," Walter said. "No, Melanie. We're just starting and you already want to make decisions for me again?" Walter gripped the steering wheel. "Fine, I will speak with Nathan." "Fine. And you're going to stand beside me." Walter glanced quickly at her. "Am I allowed to decide that?" Melanie smiled. "You are." She tried calling Nathan. No answer. She called again. Nothing. "He was expecting my call by 7, Melanie said. "Maybe he's speaking with his lawyer." Nathan answers even when he's speaking with his lawyer. Walter tried calling too. The phone rang until it went to voicemail. As they turned onto the road to the Harvey farm, Melanie noticed the lights, blue and red. She slowed down. "Walter." There were police cruisers near the house, the barn, and Nathan's car. Walter parked before even reaching the porch. The two got out. "This farm is mine," Melanie said to the officer who tried to block her way. "What is going on?" "Ma'am, stay behind the vehicle." Then she saw Nathan. He was standing beside the black car with his hands secured behind his back. "Nathan," he turned. Melanie tried to reach him, but an officer blocked the path. "Why is he in handcuffs?" Walter came up beside her. "Officer, tell us what happened." The officer looked at the two of them. "Nathan Cross is being detained under suspicion of forgery of public documents and interference with a state process." Melanie felt the shock wave. "That makes no sense." Nathan tried to step closer, but the officers led him toward one of the cruisers. "Melanie, Nathan, what's happening?" "Don't sign anything." An officer opened the car door. "Nathan." He resisted just long enough to manage to look at her. "They knew about the will." Melanie stood frozen. "Who knew?" Nathan tried to answer. The officer placed him inside the cruiser and shut the door. Melanie ran toward the vehicle, but Walter grabbed her before she could get close to the officers. It was then that a man in a suit stepped out of Melanie's house, carrying the iron box found inside the wall. Walter recognized the box instantly. "Melanie," she followed his gaze. The man handed the box to an officer. And when Melanie looked for the will on the kitchen table, she understood what had happened. The documents were seized. Melanie turned to the officer. "And what do I do now? Wait for the inspectors to arrive tomorrow and tell them the proof that saves my farm is in a police station?" "Ma'am, I cannot discuss an ongoing investigation. But you can walk into my house and take everything?" Walter held her arm before the argument escalated. "Melanie." "No, Walter. Nathan is in a police car. My documents are gone and nobody is explaining anything." The officer kept his voice firm. "Mr. Cross was reported for forgery of public documents. Until we verify the origin of the inventory and the will, neither will be returned." "We found that box," Walter said. "I was here. Your statement will be recorded." Melanie looked toward the cruiser where Nathan was kept. He remained locked inside. And for the first time since the will had appeared, Melanie feared that the document which was supposed to save the farms would end up destroying whatever chance they still had. The following morning, the inspectors didn't show up. A state judge's order had temporarily suspended the inspection until the origin of the documents was confirmed. That bought them time. But it didn't clear Nathan. Over the next 2 days, Willow Creek practically forgot about the highway and started talking about the architect's arrest. Melanie went to the police station twice. The first time, she couldn't see him. The second, she spoke with Nathan for a few minutes, accompanied by a lawyer. "Tell me you didn't forge anything," she pleaded. Nathan looked offended. "I didn't forge it." "Then how did your signature appear on the reports?" "They copied it." "Who?" "I still don't know." Nathan explained that on the afternoon before the arrest, he had received a strange call from Mayor Richard Calloway. The man knew he was investigating old documents, and worse, he had mentioned a condition in the will that Nathan had never discussed with City Hall. "That was why I said they knew," he explained. "Did you record the call?" "A part of it." Melanie felt a surge of hope. "Then show it to the police." Nathan let out a tired laugh. "Melanie, why do you think I haven't been released yet? The recording proves Calloway knew about the will. It doesn't prove it was him who forged my signature." She understood. They still had to link the mayor to the documents. "And if they can't," Nathan grew serious, "then you and Walter need to find another way to protect the farms." "Nathan, don't waste time trying to save me. My lawyer will take care of me." Melanie left the police station even more worried. Walter was waiting for her in the truck. "Well, he's innocent." "I know. How can you be so sure?" Walter started the engine. "Because a guilty man wouldn't spend a whole night trying to stop you from signing documents that could benefit him." Melanie got in. "That was almost optimistic." "Don't get used to it." That afternoon, the police found the first piece of evidence. A forensic expert confirmed that Nathan's signature on the reports had been digitally copied from an old project. Hours later, investigators seized computers at City Hall. The second piece of evidence appeared on the morning of the third day. Richard Calloway's files contained altered versions of the surveys for both farms. There were modified maps, fake reports about the soil quality, and messages exchanged with 2 investors interested in the lands near the future highway access. The plan was simple: devalue the properties, force the highway through, and then buy up the nearby areas for much less than they were actually worth. Nathan was released shortly after noon. Melanie and Walter were at the police station when he walked out. "You look terrible," Melanie said. Nathan looked down at his rumpled clothes. "Thanks. I missed you too." She hugged him. "I knew you hadn't done it. Yesterday you asked me to swear it. I was just double-checking." Walter shook his hand. "The mayor?" Nathan grew serious. "Arrested." Richard Calloway had been detained that morning. With the forged surveys and the route manipulation confirmed, the state canceled the highway project in that region. This time there was no new deadline, nor any new inspection. The farms were saved. Later on, Melanie found Nathan alone near the oak gate. She didn't want to put off that conversation. "Nathan, I need to tell you something. You're marrying Walter." Melanie was taken aback. "How do you know?" "The desk officer knew. The woman who brought my coffee knew. I think half the station knew. Margaret Bell. I don't know who that is. You'll find out eventually." Nathan smiled, but Melanie remained serious. "I'm in love with him." Her honesty stunned Nathan. Even so, he didn't try to hide it behind anger. "I realized too late. You were important to me." "Melanie, you don't have to turn this into a pretty farewell." She fell silent. Nathan continued. "I care about you. But caring about someone doesn't give me the right to make their choice harder." Melanie felt a relief she hadn't anticipated. "Are you all right?" "Not particularly." She almost laughed. "At least you're honest. I'll survive." Nathan hugged her, and as he pulled back, he pointed toward the Brooks farm. "I just hope he knows how lucky he is. I remind him every day." "I have no trouble believing that." The following afternoon, Melanie was at Walter's farm when an unfamiliar car drove down the dirt driveway. A tall young man stepped out. He had brown hair, a backpack slung over his shoulder, and a serious expression that Melanie recognized immediately. Not because she had seen him before, but because he had Walter's eyes. "Dad!" Walter stepped out of the barn and froze. "Benjamin?" The young man smiled and hugged him. Melanie stayed where she was. Walter had never mentioned a son. When Benjamin noticed her presence, he looked at his father. "Who's this?" Walter hesitated. It was brief, but Melanie noticed. "This is Melanie Harvey, my neighbor." Benjamin extended his hand. "Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you." He looked at Walter again. "You never spoke about her." Melanie waited. Walter answered, "She's a friend." The word hit Melanie in a way she hadn't expected. Friend. At the station, Walter had asked her to marry him. Now, in front of his own son, she was a friend. Melanie didn't make a scene. She said her goodbyes shortly after and went home. Walter showed up on her porch that night. "You're angry." "No, Melanie, your friend is tired." Walter closed his eyes for a moment. "I should have told you about Benjamin." "You should have." After his mother died, he went to study in Chicago. He barely comes to the farm. Usually I'm the one who goes to visit him. That explains where he lives. It doesn't explain why I didn't know he existed. Walter accepted it. I was wrong. Melanie crossed her arms. And the friend part? I was caught off guard. You had several options. Fiancé was one of them. I'm going to tell him tomorrow. Don't wait too long. Willow Creek is small. Walter had no idea how right she was. The following morning, Benjamin went to the town bakery. He intended to buy bread and head back to the farm. But while waiting at the counter, he overheard two women talking at the table next to him. 30 years difference. Margaret said the proposal was at the station. And Melanie accepted? Of course, she's marrying Walter Brooks. Benjamin turned slowly. Excuse me, who is marrying Walter Brooks? The two women went silent. That was enough. Benjamin walked out of the bakery without buying anything. When he reached the farm, he found Walter and Melanie behind the barn. The two of them were repairing the wire mesh of an old chicken coop. Dad, Walter looked up. Benjamin walked straight toward them. Are you marrying her? Melanie set down the pliers. Walter stood up. Benjamin, I was going to talk to you. When? After the wedding? Don't speak like that. I asked if you're marrying her. I am. The direct answer hit Benjamin hard. And yesterday she was just your friend. Walter tried to step closer. I should have told you. You should have. It all happened very fast. Fast? I find out in a bakery that my father is marrying a woman I met yesterday. Melanie realized that this argument was between the two of them. I'll let you two talk. Benjamin looked at her. No? Stay. Walter hardened his voice. Benjamin, she's going to be part of the family, isn't she? So stay. Melanie remained where she was. Benjamin pointed at his father. You spent years talking about my mother as if she were the only woman who ever existed for you. Your mother will always be important. And now you're marrying someone almost my age? The sentence stunned Melanie. Walter grew serious. Watch how you speak to her. I don't know her. Then don't say things you don't know. Benjamin laughed, but he was furious. You know what I do know? That I arrived yesterday and you lied to my face. I didn't lie. You called your fiancé a friend. Walter didn't reply. Benjamin looked at Melanie. I don't know what you want from my father. Benjamin, that's enough. But I know I'm not going to pretend I'm happy. Melanie remained calm. Nobody asked you to. The response seemed to irritate him even more. Fine, because I'm never going to accept this marriage. Walter took a step forward. You don't decide that. Benjamin stared at his father. Then maybe you don't need me here either. He turned and walked away. Benjamin, the young man, got into his car and slammed the door. Walter still tried to catch up to him, but Benjamin sped down the road. Melanie found Walter standing near the chicken coop. Give him time. I should have told him yesterday. You should have. Walter looked at her. You could lie a little. I promised to stop making it easy for you to run. Despite the worry, Walter almost smiled. The following morning, Melanie found an envelope among the mail. The name of a medical clinic from the capital was in the upper corner. She recognized it immediately. Weeks before, she had taken some routine tests, and with all the confusion over the lands, she had nearly forgotten. Melanie opened the letter in the kitchen. She read the first page, then went back to the beginning. Walter came in through the back door. Benjamin still isn't answering? Melanie didn't reply. He noticed the letter in her hands. What happened? She looked up. The argument with Benjamin, the wedding, and all the plans they had begun to make suddenly seemed much more complicated. Walter, we need to talk. He stepped closer, but Melanie folded the letter quickly. What did the doctor say? Nothing. Walter stopped. Melanie, I said it's nothing. She tucked the envelope into a drawer and left the kitchen before he could press her. During the rest of the morning, Melanie tried to act normally. She talked about the harvest, checked the chicken coop twice, and even complained about a spoiled apple, as if that were the biggest problem on the farm. Walter didn't ask again. That was precisely what made her nervous. Early in the afternoon, Melanie walked into the barn. When she returned, she found Walter sitting at the table with the letter open. "Did you go through my drawer? You hit a medical diagnosis." Her anger vanished. Walter had read all of it. The tests indicated a rare condition affecting her immune system. It was treatable, and the doctors were optimistic, but Melanie would need to spend 6 months in the city to begin intensive treatment. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "When I knew how." Walter set the letter on the table. "Start by telling the truth." "I was afraid." "Of me?" "Of everything. We just saved the farms. Benjamin doesn't even want to look at me. You have 2 properties to look after, and now I have to disappear for 6 months. You're not going to disappear, Walter. We are going to the city." Melanie was confused. "We? I'm coming with you. And the farms? I'll hire help. Both of them. Both. You can't take care of everything." "I can organize everything. And my appointments? I'll go to every single one." Melanie felt her eyes fill with tears. "You didn't even think." "I thought about it for the last 5 minutes. That's not thinking." "It's enough for me." She tried to laugh, but started to cry. Walter walked over to her. "I thought you would be scared." "I am scared." Melanie raised her face. "Then why are you so calm?" "Because running away has already cost me too much trouble." She hugged him. A month later, the 2 of them left for the city. Walter left the farms under the care of Frank and 2 hired hands. He rented a small apartment a few blocks from the clinic and turned Melanie's routine into an operation she considered excessive. He knew the medication times, knew the doctors by name, and carried a folder containing all the tests. The 3rd time, Walter asked a nurse if a side effect was normal. Melanie tugged his sleeve. She already answered. "I'm double-checking." "You double-checked twice, now I'm sure." Despite the complaints, Melanie felt closer to him every day. The treatment, however, began to take its toll. One night, after a particularly difficult week, Melanie sat on the bed and began to cry. Walter set down his book. "Are you in pain? Nausea?" "Walter, stop." He fell silent. "I'm afraid I won't get better." "The doctors said." "I know what they said." Melanie wiped her face. "You've already lost someone you loved. I don't want to make you go through that again." Walter understood before she finished. "No. Listen to me." "No." "Walter, maybe it would be better if we broke up." He stared at her. "Have you lost your mind?" "I'm serious. So am I. You could meet someone else." "Melanie, someone who doesn't." Walter hugged her before she could continue. "I love you." "But." "There is no but." She tried to pull away, but Walter kept holding her. "You forced me to admit I was in love with you at a crowded station. You yelled at me to marry you. Now it's going to take a lot more than a medical letter to get rid of me." Melanie cried and laughed at the same time. "That's not romantic. I'm tired." "I noticed." Walter kissed her forehead. "We are going to finish this treatment. Then we're going back home and getting married. That's it." "Are you deciding for me again?" Walter grew serious. Melanie smiled. "Just kidding." Terrible timing. She hugged him tighter. During the 3rd week of treatment, Melanie began to feel new symptoms. Her nausea increased, her fatigue shifted, and the doctors ordered additional tests. 2 days later, Walter and Melanie were before the doctor. "Doctor, just tell us," Melanie requested. The man smiled. "I have 2 pieces of news." Walter squeezed her hand. "The first is that we repeated all the tests. The previously identified condition is no longer present." Melanie was confused. "What do you mean? You are cured." "Cured completely." Walter had to shift in his seat. "And the second piece of news?" The doctor opened the results. The symptoms from last week had no relation to the illness. He turned the sheet toward them. "Melanie is pregnant." Walter froze. Melanie put her hand to her mouth. "Pregnant? With twins?" Walter turned pale. Two? At the same time?" Melanie turned to him. "Walter, I know how twins work. I'm just trying to keep up." The doctor began to laugh. Walter rested his hands on his knees. "I'm going to be a father at 58. "You are," Melanie replied. "Of 2 babies." "Walter, breathe." "I am breathing. It doesn't look like it." He got up, took 2 steps, and had to sit down again. Melanie started to laugh. "The man who climbed onto a roof during a storm is going to pass out because of 2 babies." Walter looked at her, then he smiled and cried. 2 days later, they returned to Willow Creek. The news arrived before they did. Nathan showed up that afternoon to congratulate them and brought another surprise. "I'm getting to know someone." Melanie's eyes widened. Bill? The new veterinarian, Walter nodded. Good profession. Nathan looked at Melanie. Does he always react like that? Unfortunately, the following months changed the routine of the farms. Walter started watching Melanie's every step and built 2 wooden cribs on the porch. That was where Benjamin showed up. Walter set down his tool. Son. Benjamin looked uncomfortable. I heard about the babies. Melanie remained near the door. Dad. I was unfair. Walter didn't reply. I was angry because it felt like you were replacing my mother. But I thought about it a lot. She wouldn't want you to be alone forever. Benjamin looked at Melanie. I can't say I know you. It would be hard. We spoke for about 5 minutes. He almost smiled. But I want to try. Melanie nodded. So do I. Benjamin looked back at Walter. And I support the marriage. Walter hugged his son. Melanie quietly walked into the house. Melanie, Benjamin called. She turned back. You too. The 3-way hug was awkward, but it worked. The preparation for the wedding took over Willow Creek. Frank tried to run the decoration and was banned after hanging 3 horseshoes over the altar. Margaret Bell organized the flowers and spread the word about the ceremony time before the couple had even decided on it. On the wedding day, the old manor house was completely renovated. Walter was waiting at the altar when Melanie appeared. The dress, made by local seamstresses, accommodated her already large belly. Walter stood staring at her. Don't start crying. Frank whispered. Shut up. Melanie came before him, smiling. The vows were simple. Walter promised to stay. Melanie promised to remind him of the promise whenever it was necessary. During the reception, the 2 of them began their first waltz. Are you comfortable? Walter asked. You've already asked 7 times. It was 5. Melanie stopped dancing. Walter, what? She squeezed his arm. I think my water broke. The music continued for 3 seconds. Then the barn turned into chaos. Hours later, Melanie gave birth to a healthy boy and girl. Walter cried more than the 2 babies. Days later, at the civil registry, he received the documents and read the names. The boy was named after Melanie's grandfather. The girl carried the name of Walter's late wife. He paused before speaking. Melanie, she was part of your life, and she is Benjamin's mother. Walter hugged his wife. Years went by. The old farm no longer looked old. The manor house was renovated. Flowers surrounded the porch, and 2 children ran among the apple trees, while Benjamin tried to keep them from climbing a fence. Walter watched everything standing beside Melanie. He approached from behind and hugged her. To think I almost let the 20 years convince me. Melanie turned her face to him. Good thing you didn't wait 20 years to discover that age was never the problem. Walter smiled. And what was it? Courage. It always was. Walter kissed her. Out in the field, one of the children yelled for their father. Walter closed his eyes. I bet $5 they broke something. They are your children. Ours. Then they are yours when they break something. Walter laughed and stepped off the porch. Melanie stood watching as he crossed the yard after the children. The man who once believed he was too old to start over now ran between 2 apple trees, with his kids laughing and Benjamin coming right behind. Walter! Melanie shouted. He stopped. I love you, Walter smiled. I love you too. One of the children tugged his shirt. Dad, come on, and Walter went. Because this time, he had no reason left to leave. Walter discovered that it is never too late to start over, and that often it is not age that prevents us from experiencing something new, but the fear of trying. Because when we find the courage to love and allow happiness in, life can still surprise us in ways we never imagined. If this story touched your heart, leave your comment, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel. Until the next story.